You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
We've been doing this for quite a while. This is actually our 12th year. I'm proud to say each year it has gotten better and better. African movies, African films are cutting across the initial niche sector to becoming more and more mainstream. It had to happen first because now people cannot say they are not aware of the power, they're not aware of the diversity, they're not aware of how film is being used to address issues. We are now showing African films in very well-respected venues in the United Kingdom.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to another episode of the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we explore the ideas, innovations, and strategies that are unlocking Africa's economic potential. Today, we're diving into Africa's creative economy, a sector valued in the billions globally, and also exploring how Africa can fully unlock the power of its cultural capital. Joining us today to discuss is Stella Okuzu, Director and CEO of the Royal African Society, one of the UK's most respected institutions promoting African thought, culture, and global engagement since 1901. Under Stella's leadership, the Society continues to strengthen its position as a bridge between Africa and the rest of the world, amplifying African voices and driving conversation. And recently, the Royal African Society hosted Film Africa 2025, London's biggest celebration of African cinema. Stella, welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Tessa. I'm very well, thanks. And you, how are you?
I'm very well. As I said earlier on, just recovering from man flu, so it's been a slow path back to recovery, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So as always, I like to jump straight in. So I was hoping we could discuss, first and foremost, Film Africa 2025, because this year's edition, it does promise to be something truly special. So what would you say from your perspective as CEO, what strategic innovations do you believe has made this year's festival stand out?
Thank you. We've been doing this for quite a while, Tessa. This is actually our 12th year.
Wow.
And I'm proud to say each year it has gotten better and better. This year, what we had 50 different films from 20 African countries. So some diversity there, English, French, Swahili, Arabic films, which was great. A few things I want to point out which were innovative. We also introduced learning opportunities in the film festival this year. So we had a masterclass, which was led by a very well-respected, widely acclaimed film director and producer in Africa, Mr. Kunle Afolayan. Now, what that was intended to do was to have someone who's regarded as a master of the craft in Africa speak to younger, emerging, and aspiring filmmakers and film producers. And it was such a delight. So it was an interview, which was very well received. But right after the masterclass, there was open reception. So these young, aspiring filmmakers were getting to ask questions. So there were questions during the session, but afterwards, people had one-on-one. And it really gladdened my heart that we're able to see that cross-fertilization of those who are accomplished, which he is, and other people who are aspiring to do so. Further to that, sometimes we're so focused on the future as human beings that we forget our past. And so what we did this year, we had also a tribute to a legend of film industry in Africa, Mr. Stella Nse, who was a Malian film producer. He sadly passed away in February of this year. And he really accomplished a lot. He had groundbreaking work, which included the Cannes Jury Prize-winning film, The Light. And so he really redefined African cinema and brought it to global recognition. And so we had the opportunity of this session of tribute to pay homage, if you will, to pay respect to those who had gone ahead. So you can see it's almost like a cross-generational thing, celebrating the past, having someone who is doing so well today speak to the aspiring, because these are not one-off interventions. So that was really a good thing to have, cross-generational impact. And then when people speak about the term soft power, oftentimes it is somewhat not taken as very seriously, but even art and culture is a tool for soft power. And one of the things we had in this year's edition, we had a symposium also targeted at young people, where we had Billy Woodbury. Billy Woodbury is known for being one of the founders of the Los Angeles film rebellion movement in the 60s. Now, while we all hear about Hollywood and great movies coming out of Hollywood, it hasn't always been the case, especially for African Americans. And so he also had a session where he was speaking to people how cinema can be used to change colonial narratives, how cinema can be used to advance African cultural sovereignty, which is also powerful and really speaks to the work the Royal Africa Society does. So those are a few of the innovations that we're really proud about, the new things that we introduced in the film festival, which happened a short while ago.
Thank you for sharing that. So you've touched on some great areas of innovation and inclusion within the festival, which we will discuss in detail. But if we look at the overall festival and its impact, how do you feel Film Africa is positioned or contributes to the growth of Africa's creative economy and also the cultural exports in terms of what you touched on, the soft power?
Okay, so there are two things. You find that usually you have two categories of people. So you have people who are creatives and who are respected and honored for their craft. Okay. Then you have another group of people who are business people who have the gift of spotting talent, spotting opportunity, and taking that further. Oftentimes, both groups do not meet. So in Film Africa, while we are showcasing these films, we intentionally communicate this, not just through social media, but also ensure that we have invited guests who cut across, especially the latter group of people who can take these things further. So we find that after the films, so what we have, it was a very, very long process in selecting the movies. To be honest, this started in January and then the festival took place in November. So 387 films were viewed before we were able to select the 50 that were screened. And so what we do is we ensure that there are conversations held between people who are distributors, people who can finance, such that we build a sustainable ecosystem of creatives in the film sector in Africa and other parties who are happy to invest and provide infrastructural support and provide visibility such that these things can be taken further afield. So, for instance, within the film festival, we've had conversations with specific screeners about getting distribution of their films in the United Kingdom. We've had conversations about certain films being screened with people in government, because what it is, Tesse, was that the movies that were selected were each movies that spoke to specific social issues, human issues. I don't want to call them African issues alone, because I find that these are things that cut across all of humanity. So things like child marriage, things about deprivation of our forests, injustice in economic situations, for instance, in the mining industry. These are things that were brought to fore from those movies, and we determined that there are certain movies that even people in government need to have the opportunity to see. So that's the kind of impact we create. So impact not just for the filmmakers who now know that they have a platform they can call their own, a platform where they can be connected to other people to enable them further expand their craft. But we use this platform also as a medium of change, which benefits not just Africans, but the larger society as a whole. So these are the reasons why we continue to do this. We really look forward to even having it better and bigger, even in the coming years.
You touched on the ecosystem and infrastructure. Venues play a big part in this. This year, Film Africa returned to prestigious venues such as BFI South Bank. What does hosting the festival in these major cultural spaces signal about the rising value of African cinema?
Thank you. You know what it is? First of all, for those venues to actually even accept for the movies to be screened is indicative of the fact that African movies are going outside a niche market, if you will. No longer is it a niche sector for a specialized and small group of people to watch. So we had, like you've mentioned, BFI, we had BAFTA, the masterclass took place in BAFTA. And in each of these venues, they have their members. And what they did is reserve seats for their members. So we're finding that the African movies, African films are cutting across the initial niche sector to becoming more and more mainstream. A very interesting example I would also like to cite. So the opening movie we had when the film kicked off was My Father's Shadow, which is a debut movie by Akinola Davis. Now, that movie was produced by a British Nigerian, but it will interest you to know, Tessa, that that film was nominated by the British government as its nomination for Best British International Film for Oscar Awards 2026. So you can see the divide, the boundaries are blurring, if you will. And we're having people across continents collaborating on films. We have African films being presented as work from, say, United Kingdom, the specific example I've given. And so we're happy and we're really very proud to say that, organizing and putting resources behind Film Africa year on year has helped us, expand the degree of acceptance of African films broadly. It's taking it to a wider community. Because at the end of the day, people who are in business, they're looking at who are the potential viewers, what are the numbers that will be looking at these films for them to be able to put their money behind it. So that's something that we're very happy to continue to do in expanding that ecosystem. Even things that we'll be looking to do going forward, there's a change in trend. So while people still go to cinemas, truth be told, a lot of people are watching these films through online media. And so increasingly, you would also see us partner with those online big players such that we bring these to the benefit of people wherever they are, really.
You touched on something quite key there, which is about African movies cutting across the niche sector, which then allows you to open up and speak specifically about films from African markets. I know this year's spotlight on DRC, a country which has powerful cultural heritage. Why do you think this was the right moment to highlight Congolese cinema?
You know what it is? Everyone knows of DRC one way or the other. To be honest, I would say it hasn't always been a balanced view.
Yes.
Most people will think of DRC, yes, as a resource-rich nation, but a resource-rich nation which has, I dare say, not really benefiting from its resources. And then also we hear a lot about conflict and war. But no one really speaks to the rich cultural heritage of that country. And so we felt this was the time. Now, so I dare say it's a convergence of incidences, because even across global communities, conversations are not just about the profit objective, but also about the social impact. And so while you have conversations around ESG, why COP30 was such a big event, people are thinking, what are the things that even go beyond the profit criteria, if you will, for businesses? Now, these films, each of the films that have been showcased from the DRC have been films that have touched on different social issues. So it's using film as a channel which people would not say they don't want to be part of. People will be less resistant, if you will, to watching a movie. So it's an opportunity to show that the issues that are going on in DRC are the issues that are going on globally. And they're issues that we go to speak about at conferences. And so the more people who know about these things, the better for everyone. I think really is that shift from just the profit motive to what are the things that enable us to operate sustainable and responsible businesses, that has created the opportune time to showcase DRC, which was our country of focus, and very proudly so. There was a specific movie that was shown a few days ago. That movie was set in the northern part of Kenya. And the title of the movie, I recall, is Nawi, and the focus was child marriage, children being given up for marriage. And what we have done what we did in the festival was that we had panel conversations either before or after, and statistics were shared. Specifically, I'm speaking about, child marriages. And I was quite shocked to find out this is even a problem in the United Kingdom. So these are problems that we need to address as humanity, but we can use real stories from these countries, whether it's DRC, Zimbabwe, or Kenya, to showcase it, so people know that lives are impacted by these things. Giving data is one way of telling a problem, but telling a story is always so powerful, Tessa, and which is what we are doing through the film festival, which we have done and will continue to do.
I know you noted that conversations like these are not just about profits. Obviously, we can't ignore the money side of it, as it is important. But how can a spotlight like this translate into real economic or industry opportunities for Congolese filmmakers and creatives?
Good question. Really good question, Tessa. What is happening is that as these films are screened, so actually there's a film that was screened which hasn't even been screened in Congo, but is now screened in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Indeed, I know. So it was screened in the UK, and then people in the UK are now taking interest in this to distribute it further. So you see what it was, you had a creative, and that creative, through one of our sponsors, was able to place this as one of the films to be showcased at Film Africa. And following from that, there are now conversations about wider distribution. So you see, we get to the profit objectives. I'm not saying this should be loss-making ventures, but sometimes you need to at least put the issue ahead. When once people can connect, that really is the hook, because people want to invest in things that they can identify with, things that they are concerned about, things that they really feel connected to, and which is what the Film Africa does. It provides the platform for the showcasing, and then the interested parties can now take this further to ensure that the profit, the distribution objectives are met, I would say.
I guess it's safe to say that Film Africa is much more than film screening. It's also a platform for ideas, industry development, and long-term creative growth. So with that in mind, as the Royal African Society, how do you see platforms like Film Africa as a catalyst to stimulating investment and partnership in the creative industries?
Okay. What it is, you are right, is more than just a film festival. What we say it's a movement. Following on from the film festival we've hosted, we're now into conversations about how we can organize specific events that speak to financing the creative industry, financing the film industry as a precursor to a further film festival. Now, but I dare say if we hadn't invested in the film festivals as having currently screened, we wouldn't have the credibility, if you will, to gather people together for further conversations. And because we've done this consistently for 12 years, people realize that the Royal Africa Society is serious about using film to amplify the voice of Africa. And beyond that, being able to bring people together. We see ourselves as conveners, as a convener of individuals, corporations, institutions that are working towards improving business, education, arts and culture, and policy, improving policy, anything that affects Africa. And so Film Africa just speaks specifically to that. So it was a very successful festival, but following from that, further conversations are being had, which really is where we see larger impact. The more people we're able to link up for distribution, link up for funding, link up for production, we are reinvesting, if you will, in the African continent, which is the youngest continent on Earth at the moment.
It is indeed. With that in mind, many business ecosystems across the continent, they still undervalue the economic power of film and storytelling, which is why it's so heavily underinvested. What would you say are the barriers that need to be removed so that African film storytelling can actually unlock its full potential?
Two things that readily come to mind. Well, first is the access to funding. But even coming from a finance background myself, I know that money goes where it sees value. So by creating the festival, we are demonstrating that these are things that you really should be paying attention to. There are people who would sponsor specifically the Africa Film Festival because we gather data about the number of people that are attending, the kind of visibility we have even on platforms such as yours, Tesso, and also other journalistic channels. So there are some people who would want to be part of Film Africa just because they can see it gives them a level of visibility. Now, so I spoke about finance. Another thing is education, training. Now, remember I said we had a masterclass. Now, for the platform provides, the film festival provides a platform for people to say, these are the things that we are doing and these are the facilities that we have. So specifically on the masterclass that was part of the festival gone, where there was conversations around a film academy in Africa where young people can go to acquire skills of a globally acceptable quality. What has held the industry back before now has been the quality of the production, but where you now see films from Africa being recognized at the global stage, at Cannes Film Festival, being nominated for Oscar awards, even aspiring film producers will now have greater confidence that there's a larger acceptance, but then there's a larger demand. That demand requires their upping their game in terms of their skills and in terms of even the infrastructure available for them. So from a financing standpoint, financiers can determine at what point within a value chain, because I think really the film industry is very largely understood. It has a value chain like every other industry. So there are people who may want to invest in script writing. There are people who may want to invest in the filmmaking. There are people who may want to invest in the post-production editing. But unless we bring these opportunities to the fore, people are not aware of that. And that is the role that we play in having this festival where industry professionals, not just the creatives, can sit back and say, okay, this is how I want to collaborate going forward. So that the point I would want to make, Tess, is that even though the film festival has come and gone, the conversations haven't ended. I dare say the conversations are only just starting and will be continuous.
Great. Going back to what you mentioned about learning and training, you hosted the Kunle Afolayan Masterclass. What do you hope filmmakers and creators gain from the insights from the masterclass?
I really enjoyed that masterclass. I attended it myself. One thing that really struck me was that, and speaking to some of the aspiring filmmakers afterwards, it increased their level of confidence. And because Mr. Kunle Afolayan did not give a picture of everything being hunky-dory, there were no challenges along the way. He shared the challenges. He spoke about what they were and how he went about surmounting them. So I dare say that will increase the level of confidence of aspiring filmmakers, producers, that I may experience challenges along the way, but now I can see an example of someone who looks and speaks like me, of how he overcome those challenges. And so I feel more confident to arise and put my skill to work. That really has been the outcome of that masterclass, the change in the mindset for them to know that these things are possible. I think that is really empowering. I cannot overemphasize, especially as we have such a youthful population in Africa. It is important that they know that they do stand a chance, that they too can move from obscurity to being national prides, regional prides. And as Akinola Davis has become, a global icon, these things are achievable. That's a very strong message that has came through from the festival.
It's safe to say it's a powerful example of scaling African creativity globally. So how can success stories like this inspire new investment models across the continent?
I think it's really by further engagement. So following the festival, there's further communication about the number of people that attended. There's a lot of visibility. But then subsequent to that will be a reconvening of the financial players. Now, but it had to happen first, because now people cannot say they are not aware of the power. They're not aware of the diversity. They're not aware of how film is being used to address issues. The follow-on conversation to that is now the specific finance thereof. Finance still remains a challenge, but because we now have success stories that we can show that have been based on films that were produced, edited, everything done on the continent. So it becomes more interesting, becomes more attractive to the financial players. That's where we are at the moment. And we really look forward to having those conversations and taking them further.
So if we zoom out from specific success stories and look at the global picture, from your perspective, how is the global perception of African cinema evolving?
It's evolved in the sense that, first of all, I spoke about the change, the very, very significant improvement in the quality. You don't get to screen an African-produced film at the Cannes Film Festival, Toronto Film Festival, Berlin Film Festival, or even Film Africa in London, organized by the Royal African Society, if you don't meet certain quality criteria. Even the venues, now you must remember, Tessa, that the venues at which these films are screened also have their reputation to protect. So the fact that we're able to have these films screened at places like BFI, BAFTA, Riverside, it goes to show that there is an acceptance of these films by an audience outside of the African community. I think that is massive. And it's that broader acceptance that will lead to broader participation, funding, and upskilling. Essentially, it's about highlighting that this is an opportunity which might have been underestimated, but now has been brought to the fore. And so I dare say, Tess, that very, very interesting times lie ahead for the industry. Another thing we're seeing is a lot of collaboration. So within the festival gone, we had films that were produced, say, in northern Kenya, in the most remote parts of some of these countries. But there was talent from people in Germany, in the United Kingdom, in UK, which is amazing because talent would go where it is appreciated and where it is wanted. Those people would not have devoted their time and effort to creating and participating in the creation of these African films if they didn't see the value. And it can only get better, I would say.
So if we look at one of the largest groups of consumers of African film, which is the African diaspora, how can the diaspora collaborate more effectively to help with this acceleration or growth in Africa's film industry?
Two ways. One is to watch the films, yes. Because at the end of the day, you need the seats, you need the bombs on the seats. Okay. So when a film comes to, say, London, will I go to a cinema to watch it? I think a stereotype has been broken, okay, where we are now showing African films in very, very well-respected venues in the United Kingdom. And we expect to see, so this is like specific expectation from people in the diaspora to go and watch those movies. You know, it would be sad if, I mean, it is what it is, but it would be sad if there's a premiere or a showing of an African movie and then most of the people in the room are not even Africans. I have seen that happen in other fora. So for instance, private equity, you're discussing private equity, but you ask yourself, where are the Africans in the room? Yes. That must not be the case in the film industry. The second part that people in the diaspora especially should play in advancing African film is not being shy to come forth with their talent. I think it's a human thing. Oftentimes, it's the gifted person that downplays their gift because for them, they think it's normal. I think it's incredibly inspiring that the film that has been nominated by the United Kingdom for its Best British International Film is from a member of the African diaspora in the United Kingdom who was creating his first film ever. What are the chances? Now, they've seen this happen. Well, I'm part of the UK diaspora, so yes. we have seen this happen. So those of us who may have those creative ideas that we're keeping in our desks, you know, or under the pillows, we need to bring them to the fore, you know, because you never know. You could be the next filmmaker whose film gets an award at the Cannes Film Festival or is selected for an Oscar. You don't know until you try. Now, the proof of concept has been delivered. So now it's been proven that the barriers don't exist unless they continue to exist in our minds. And so we need to take the step forward, both to attend, to watch, and also to participate. Participating is not actually even limited to just those in the creative space. So you could be a script writer, but you could also be someone who's fantastic with lighting or other infrastructure that is required. Bring your skills forward, ask questions. The Royal Africa Society, we see ourselves as a convener. So even if people were asking, do you see any need? Where do you think my skills will be required? We're happy to point them, you know, to these producers so that we can see more collaboration, you know, within the continent and indeed across the continent, across continents.
Thank you for sharing that. So keeping on the theme of growth, this year's program brought together some of the continent's most exciting talent. Were there any emerging voices or trends in the 2025 lineup that really excited you?
Well, to be honest, there was a lot of emotions. I wouldn't use the word excited. I was troubled about the enormity of the girl-child marriage statistics. If my memory serves me right, it's like every 23 seconds, a girl child is being given up for marriage, and that's across the world, including the United Kingdom. And so my thoughts were, oh my God, what do I do to make this stop? And what I found very interesting is that we have charities. So, different charities focus on different issues. If it's climate change, if it's economic empowerment, advancement of women, girl-child issues. It was very interesting to see the number of charities that are involved in partnerships with filmmakers. It was quite an eye-opener for me, and I would like to believe it would also be an eye-opener for people in that space, that these conversations can be had with people outside of the film industry. So to answer your question, it's really about what are the issues at stake, what are the trends that we're seeing, and the issues that were discussed are the same issues which, are discussed at fora like COP30 that took place. I find it very interesting when a filmmaker showcases how their film is aligned with some of the United Nations SDG goals. So these are things that we all have our different ways to contribute to. And what I'm seeing specifically in the Africa film industry is that while the films are entertaining, they're also very educating. And they're educating to the extent that they bring about action from the viewers. So there are three parts: be entertained, be educated, and take up a call for action, I would say.
Thank you for sharing. Now, before we wrap up, I want to zoom back in on the Royal African Society. I know you've spoken about strengthening the Royal African Society role as a bridge between Africa and the rest of the world. So how do you see cultural programming like Film Africa strengthening that bridge?
Good question. So I'll tell you a bit more about Film Royal Africa Society. So we have different areas of intervention. So there's arts and culture, and the film festival is our flagship proposition, if you will, along that value center. We also have interventions in business where we have monthly African conversation series where business people come and speak about the different things that they are doing or aspire to do. We also have interventions in education where we have a management journal is the most acclaimed African journal on the continent, and we have a platform, African Arguments, where journalists and academics can submit their articles. And we also serve as a secretariat for the All Political Parties group in Africa. Now, I share that as a background to answer your question. Because the Royal Africa Society is involved in more than culture, we are able to bring people from different segments. So if there's a film that has been shown and we feel people in Parliament, we are able to softly suggest that. If we see a film or a film in the making that speaks to a specific issue that a corporate is involved in, so for instance, renewable energy, we are able to provide introductions such that those conversations can be had. So going forward, it's really about continuing what we do in connecting people such that through collaboration, we address the issues that are important to the continent and lovers of the continent. Because even within our membership, we're not just a membership of people from Africa, people who have grown up in Africa, people from the United Kingdom, from Europe, from different parts of the world, but have an interest and love for Africa, people within our network. And so we seek to continue to mine that. So we do a lot of crisscrossing, not party crisscrossing at this time, but crisscrossing between bringing conversations between corporates and people in the creative space so that they can begin to unlock even greater potential for the benefit of all.
Thank you. So as the Royal African Society continues to expand its footprint globally, what would you say is your long-term vision for how it will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay. Yeah, we have the concept of the global African. Okay. The fact that Stella lives and works in London doesn't mean that if she were to move to New York, she's any less an African than she is, or any other part of the world. I just mentioned New York as an example. And so what we would be looking to do going forward is also expand that reach. Specifically in the next year would mark 125 years of the Royal Africa Society. And so what we're looking to do going forward is how we can involve other regions in what we do, in the interventions, in the relationships. So it's not just between the United Kingdom and Africa, but other nations, other continents that have an interest in Africa. We all speak about how the population is rising. So Africa has become the new bride, if you will, where more mature industries, more mature countries are looking to play a part in a responsible way. So in a way that is a strategic partnership, win-win. If you were to do some research to find out which are the top 10 countries with the fastest growth rate, 6 of those 10 are African countries. And so Africa is at a position where we finally have the attention that is deserving of the continent. And Royal Africa Society takes its position very seriously to ensure that we're able to facilitate a sustainable and a balanced growth for the continent.
So looking ahead, what does the future of Africa's creative economy look like to you, and what role do you hope platforms like Film Africa play within that?
Mm-hmm. The plan and the aspiration, the vision is that we wouldn't really be having conversations. We're not ignoring the fact that there are African movies, but if someone says to you, Tessa, say, I watched a really brilliant movie over the weekend, your first question to them will not be, what was the country of origin? You probably ask, who was in it? Who was the producer? Yeah. Now, our aspiration is that those will be the kind of conversations to be had about African movies, because at that point, African movies would have moved from being a segment of the global film industry to being part of the mainstream conversation. So when you say you saw a great movie, oh, really? Who was the producer? Oh, it's one African producer. Oh, okay, I've heard about him. So it's not like we're categorized, but we'll be part of those mainstream conversations. So when we're part of the mainstream, so you have mainstream conversations, mainstream platform, mainstream infrastructure, mainstream funding. That really is our aspiration as a Royal Africa Society. And we really seek to use our position as a Royal Charter connected with, we have the benefit of, and we continue to grow our membership, both individually and corporates. And so long as those corporates buy in, which they do, to the work we do, which is addressing the issues that affect the continent, we're hoping to be able to facilitate the mainstream placement for African cinema globally.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are good or when times are challenging. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
There's one I have, which is an African proverb, and I use it quite often. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. So that has been my guiding principle for collaboration. It actually speaks to the work the Royal Africa Society does as a convener of people addressing issues that we have common concern about. So go with others, don't go alone, is what I would say.
Brilliant. A perfect note to end today's conversation. Stella, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights and the incredible work that you're doing to elevate African cinema, voices, and also strengthen those global partnerships within the continent. And as we mentioned before, Film Africa, it's not just a festival, it's a movement and a powerful reminder that Africa's creative economy is also a strategic engine for growth, identity, and also influence. So thank you for joining us today. Absolute pleasure, and I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure too speaking with you, Tessa. And many thanks for the great work you're doing.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.